Hello, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the Marketing Guides for Small Business podcast. My name is Ian, and I'm joined by Jen, Ken, and Paul, and together we are your marketing guides. Need a drum roll or something. All right. So, nice, good job. We all know that any time is a good time to plan, but for many of us, this time of year, as the year winds down, we take the time to plan for next year's success. It's just part of the ebb and flow of business that if we want to do well, we need to prepare. And in this episode, we'll cover this vital topic for marketing success, the all important process of marketing planning. What is it? Who should be involved? How to plan successfully and how to stick to your plan. So, I'm going to start off. What I've done is I've tried to break this down into sections. So, the first section I'm going to call the marketing review meeting. So, Jen, I wanted to start with you. Before we can create a marketing plan, we need to know what the results are from the past year. Can you share why this is so important and some things a business should do and the data they should gather and collect prior to running the annual review meeting?
Yeah, certainly. So the annual review meeting. So I guess there's two types of companies that would fall into this. There's first one that hasn't done any marketing before and is looking forward to doing marketing. So I think that's going to be covered in a different question. But just obviously, if you haven't done marketing before, that's a whole different ball game in order to set yourself up for what you're going to start to do. If you have been involved in doing your marketing for at least a year, some of the things you're going to want to gather. First of all, so some of these things are going to be very obviously numbers based. There's going to be other things around like how did the team perform? How did it feel? How did it work? And were you running your marketing against any kind of plan? Or is it the kind of thing that you were just sort of like throwing things into the mix as you went? And as funny as that may sound, a lot of small businesses start off that way, right? They're like, oh, we can't do a full marketing plan. Maybe we'll start with the newsletter. They get more comfortable with that and they throw in other things throughout the year. So really taking stock of what it is that you've done. So let's see what have you pulling your analytics for your social media. What have you done on there? When I say analytics, so how many times were you posting? What kind of traffic did your social media have back to your website? What kind of traffic did your social media have back to wherever you were sending your traffic? Did you get any more followers? Did you get the engagement you were hoping for or put a goal against? You also want to check on your email marketing. So if you were doing any drip campaigns, any newsletters, what was the overall results of that? Did you keep up a monthly or weekly or daily cadence? What was your open rate? What were the results? Did it do what you thought or what you had it set out to do? And in these past two things where I've said what you thought it would do versus you set out to do, it's amazing how many small business owners will embrace certain things about marketing. And then it's not until the end of the year or the end of the quarter or when they have the review, you frequently hear, oh, well, I thought it was going to do much better. I hoped it would do much better. You would think it would have done much better. But quite seriously, without putting any kind of goals in place at the beginning to measure yourself against, that's not the right question to be asking, because typically you're never going to knock it out of the park if you're not planning to, and you'll always end up feeling like your marketing isn't working for you. So with that, some more things to pull together for your annual review meeting, any kind of web statistics. So how did you start at the beginning of the year? How did you end at the end of the year? What was your website visitors? How long did they stay? Which pages did they look most at? Did they complete anything that you wanted them to complete? So was that a purchase? Was that a sign up for an email? Was that a download? What did they do on your website? What did you want them to do? How did that work out there? And the other thing is, I mean, it's going to sound pretty obvious, but with any kind of business, if you're not selling something, it's really just a hobby. So where are your sales coming from? You could have found out by the end of the year, you're putting a whole bunch of effort into things that are happening online. when really the business owner is bringing in all the sales from in-person, referral meetings and that kind of thing. So really trying to evaluate what happened online, what happened offline, and where exactly did your sales come from. So there's a bulk of things there to get you started for your review meeting.
Awesome. Thank you. And there's probably going to be some overlap with this question for you, Ken. But what is in, so Jen already kind of explained a little bit about what an annual review meeting is and what it should cover. Do you have anything else to add to that? And then also, I think a really important question is, who should be in an annual review meeting?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, if you've got contracts or agreements in place with marketing vendors, then you need to align what was that agreement, what was stated that was going to be covered in that, and was it X number of deliverables, was it X number of results, and I think you need to review that for sure. So and also seeing, was there a need to change course, throughout the middle of the year for whatever reason. But I think it's really important to make sure that, anybody who's a stakeholder in the business should be considered to be invited. That doesn't mean that you want everybody there, because you'll get inundated, you'll get so many ideas, and it may prove to be challenging. And that, I think you'd save that for a full-blown marketing strategy session. This is really a review session. But you want to, anybody who's been involved with the marketing activities, they need to either have somebody be able to speak on their behalf, or maybe they make an appearance, for to cover their section. So, for example, if they were doing email marketing campaigns, I think it's also important to, one of the things that we come across occasionally is that there are people who are basically funders of an organization. And obviously they have a big stake in the performance of the company that they're providing the funding for. And many times we don't know about that as a marketing agency. We're working directly with the business owner and their marketing, internal marketing person or team. And then all of a sudden, boom, you find out that there are external stakeholders that are making investments in the business, and they're like, well, we need to cut marketing budgets by 30% because we're expecting a recession, or whatever. And it's so you want to try to eliminate those surprises for sure. And so I think it's important, when you're getting prepared for this meeting, to reach back out to the people that you've been working with and say, is there anybody else that we need to know of that has an interest and a stake in the performance of what we're doing here? And, the challenging thing is, if you've got multiple marketing vendors, somebody's doing a CRM system for you and some automations, somebody's doing, offline stuff, print and direct mail and stuff like that. And then you've got an SEO company that handles the website and content creation. And, it can be awkward to get all of those people together. But I think it's, there needs to be visibility in each one of those efforts, because otherwise you're leaving a lot of money on the table in terms of opportunity costs.
Yeah. And visibility. And I think you already talked about this, but accountability, right? Like that's, you got to be able to hold people accountable for what they're responsible for. And I thought this was an interesting question, and I think you did as well, Paul. But this is taking in the human factor of the relationships and accountabilities and responsibilities. But how can a business leadership team or owner, depending on the structure of the business, create a healthy, positive environment in a marketing review meeting when really you are presenting the facts in a transparent way in order for them to be reviewed and discussed in a positive manner?
Yeah, well, first of all, make sure the purpose of the meeting is defined and there's a clear agenda. Because if you don't do that, people are just going to be throwing stuff out there and it'll quickly go off track. And focus on the data as much as possible. make sure all the thin-skinned people know that they're not being judged individually, that this is about the performance of marketing campaigns. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And you have to know why. If something worked, what made it work? If something didn't work, what went wrong, and how can you correct that and improve performance in the future? And, encourage people to participate and be open-minded about people's ideas. And like I said, just make sure people know that this is not an individual assessment of their performance. It's about the marketing campaigns.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, having been in these types of meetings, and I think we all have on this forum, the guides on this call, but I think the one thing that really sets the tone, despite the structure of who the business you're in, right? If there's clarity of who the leader is in this meeting, who's running the meeting, but then also there's always, if it's not the owner or the president or whoever running the meeting, but if there is care and if there is respect shown by the person running the meeting and also the ownership level or leadership level people, that can really set the tone in a positive manner. Because if they slip or if they show disrespect to people, all of a sudden everybody recoils and starts to protect themselves.
Yeah, they get defensive.
Yeah. Jen, why does it often make sense to set the marketing review meeting and the marketing planning meeting as two separate meetings?
It makes a lot of sense because there are two different topics, and they both need their own focus. So the marketing review meeting is what it suggests, but it's really taking a look back. Let's call it the year. What happened? And then there needs to be some time in there for the discussion about why that happened. So what were our expectations? Were they met? Were they not? And like I said in the previous answer, there's things involved in running your marketing that aren't always numbers related. And what I mean by that is, in order to get the content out the door, so in order to get the writing done, the visuals done, there's a whole process involving a lot of timing and then a lot of experts to help get that out the door for you. And so you want to be sure that you're not just looking at the numbers, but how did our processes for marketing work this year? And is there anything in there where we can tighten up the timelines, or we can, do better with the communication and things like that? So the review, it's big enough for its own meeting and its own focus. And then the planning meeting, that has to come after you have decided, okay, based on the review, what should we change? What should we improve on? And it also has to take into account, what are you doing with your business this year? Are we running the same plan as we did last year? Which is something that I would not recommend, because even if you're thinking, our business hasn't changed that much, your clients have, the market has. Yeah, like it's that probably the tools that you use have gone through some kind of changes. So it's important to understand, what does the business want to do for the next year? How is marketing going to support that? And then plan for that. So with so much to get through, and the review having to come before the planning of the next year, it just makes sense to have them in two separate meetings.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it also lends itself, I think you've covered this, but just to go back to what Paul was talking about, I think it actually lends itself in a positive way of separating the data gathering and the multiple inputs you can get with the planning part. And part of that, I think too, is, and there's different views on this. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think. My view on the planning meeting, the review meeting, is that you actually have a broader community in that meeting. Like, you have customer service, you have sales, you might even have finance in there. But it's all of the people that are contributors and can help guide the information you'll use to create a plan. But ultimately, when you then transition into the planning phase, I wouldn't include those people, because they don't have the marketing expertise to then take the data and create a plan. And I've seen it where, especially in corporate environments, where you have a much bigger team and multiple teams, I've actually seen planning meetings go off the rails because then you have sales, customer service, finance, maybe some other production people in there who are taking you down tangents that are not strategic, because again, they're pulling you back into their own personal views rather than a very strategic approach. What do you guys, what's been your experience, and is your philosophy similar, or do you have a different philosophy? I'm curious.
I have a slightly similar and just a bit different.
Yeah.
With the review meeting, I think it's important to have the folks in that meeting that were there, at the start, because just what you outlined, I've seen happen in review meetings when folks that have had nothing to do with marketing come in and give their 2 cents to how it went this year. I guess my favorite phrase is, "Oh, we thought we'd do a lot better than we did." And this is a person or a department that had no idea what the KPIs were, no idea what the constraints were, no idea what the goals were, and just lobbing in their 2 cents there. So and you know what? It's often not, "Yay, team! Look what marketing's done for us." It's often like, "Oh, well, why isn't this? Why isn't this? Why isn't this?"
A complaint fest.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's important to get those folks on board. I'm just, as I'm answering your question, I wonder if there can be like, a general review meeting where you can hear that, because that's going to matter, right? If you can help sales, if you can help customer service, if marketing can become, a real hero and important hub in the organization, that's fantastic. But on the other hand, marketing has to be held accountable for what it knew it was doing, at the beginning of the program.
Yeah, Ian, that's interesting about who should or shouldn't be in the meeting, because generally you don't want the IT people in the marketing meeting, yet it's the IT.
And I forgot to mention the IT department. I'm sorry.
It's the IT people that have to keep marketing from doing something that's going to compromise, corporate security, digital security. So they kind of have to know what the marketing people are doing. They have to know what people are doing to a certain degree.
Well, and that brings up a great question, Paul. So I think they could be in the review meeting. Personally, I wouldn't include them in the planning session. But for the same reason, legal could be in the review meeting, but I wouldn't invite them to the planning session. I would invite those groups or those people to the presentation of the plan once it's been prepared and approved. Just because, again, I've seen it where the chief legal counsel in a large nationwide business started making design decisions and branding decisions when they had no expertise in that way, right? So you got to be very careful. And again, we're talking smaller businesses, but I think there's a premise there that you got to be careful of.
Yeah, we just had a client that is going through a compliance audit and had to change a bunch of stuff on their website.
Yeah.
I'll just say, I think it's important to establish lines of communication, and I think the preferred way of years of doing consulting and working with businesses and organizations where you've got people across organizational lines, you need to have somebody empowered within the organization to be able to speak for and act on behalf of everybody in the organization. Otherwise, it's going to be chaos. So I really think you keep the meeting small. I think you keep it to the business owners or key managers or the chief marketing implementation person for the organization. And if you need more information, take it outside the damn meeting and go get that information and then come back. Otherwise, it's just going to be chaos. I think you keep these meetings lean and mean and focused on the people who really ultimately are the decision makers anyway.
Interesting. Great thoughts. Thank you. And Ken, the next question is for you. And this is, and we're now transitioning. So we've done the review meeting. We've done a lot of data gathering in order to understand what happened in the past year, right? Again, assuming that you did marketing in the past year. Otherwise, your meeting's going to be super short from the review meeting standpoint. Either sales were up, new patients were up, whatever your metrics were from a business standpoint. One point I should make about the review meeting, I think it was mentioned, but just to clarify, some of the key metrics you should really be looking at is what were the big level, high level KPIs for the organization as a whole, your business as a whole. Usually that falls into sales and the things immediately before sales, and then also retention, right? Those are some key metrics. And if the closer you can attach your marketing metrics to those will help you in the next phase, which is then transitioning into the next meeting, which is the marketing planning meeting. So this is where you're regrouping, you've got the data. Now you're going to develop a plan for the coming year. So Ken, as we transition from looking backwards to looking and planning for the future, how do we ensure that the plans we create will align with the overarching business goals? And what things should we be looking at?
Yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, I find it's way too common when people decide that they want to try to either launch or market something new. Now, they may have been doing it all along, but now they're like, okay, and they want to use the same marketing budget as what they've had, and we've talked about this on this show before. The world does not stay still. It's not static, and the marketing investment levels that maybe worked last year maybe don't make sense this year, up or down, So I think, it's really common. And I think there's a big trap that a lot of businesses fall into. And I'm sure, Paul, you can attest to this, that I'm as guilty as anybody about this. Sometimes the best thing that you should do from a marketing perspective is just double down on what's already making you a lot of money and is highly profitable. And don't worry about trying to market this little side service that you think, hey, it's a really cool idea, and spend a lot of time and energy there, and because that's a distraction. And unless you're prepared to make a real marketing budget to go after that, leave it alone. So I think everybody needs to be challenged about those kinds of things. When you look at who your ideal customers are, if you don't already know who those are, if you don't know who are the biggest people that are generating the business for you, lifetime value of a customer, what is the profile of that type of a customer? Should you be going in and getting more of those types of customers? These are the things that you need to be looking at and thinking about. And the reality is channels are changing dramatically. I mean, if you would have talked to me a year or 18 months ago, Facebook is a channel that I think is a pretty important one for a lot of businesses. Now it's still necessary, but I don't know that it's important in my mind. There are other channels and other things that are popping up.
Go TikTok.
What's that?
Go TikTok.
Yeah. I mean, SEO has changed a lot over the last 8 to 9 months. I mean, Google has been releasing some updates, to its algorithm that have been rocking a lot of people's worlds. And so, you need to walk into this planning meeting with a deep understanding of what really is going on in the world of marketing. Are people leaving a channel that maybe was working for you before that's not really working for you now? And you know what? It's okay if you stop it and you move on. The last thing you want to do is keep writing something to the point where it's no longer delivering results for you. So I think it's, you've got to look at profitability. You've got to understand the lifetime value of a client. You've got to understand the opportunity costs that you're missing out because you're not willing to spend that extra $500 on some strategy that could generate tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. You need to be realistic about these things. Right now, I think one of the biggest metrics that most people aren't thinking about, everybody talks about they want the phone to ring and they want forms submitted on their website. I say the thing that's most important are booked appointments. That's where the money starts to really come into play. When somebody is booking an appointment, whether it's an estimate, whether it's scheduling, an appointment to come in and get an actual service from like a dentist or, a hairstylist or whatever, or if they're making a reservation at a restaurant, whatever it is, booked appointments, in that broad category, I think is a critical metric that nobody is really doing a great job of tracking right now across small businesses. And yet that's the number one thing. I think the other thing is, and I'm kind of going off on some tangents here. I know, Ian, I'm probably not talking about the things that you want me to talk about, but
Hey, it's
these
okay.
are mistakes. These are mistakes that I think people make that they need to fix. How many phone calls are you missing? How slow are you responding when somebody is reaching out trying to contact your business and give you money to help them solve their problem? Speed of response, as we've talked about, is absolutely critical. And if you don't have those components in place, you're failing. And so if you don't have the metrics in place from the previous year, that's absolutely critical for you to get into your plan for the upcoming year. I just really think, you've got to keep your business focused. And every business, if you don't understand the cost of customer acquisition, at least at some high level, look, it's hard to track and it's hard to measure. There are tools that will allow you to do better jobs of it. If you've got a shorter sales cycle, it's typically easier to measure that than it is if you've got a longer sales cycle, because people may be hitting your website 25 times before they're just making a decision, or seeing you on social media or, paid ads or whatever. And so you need to understand the paths that people are likely to take. We've talked about it before. You've got to have that marketing hourglass really defined and understand what your customer's buyer's journey really is. And position yourself to be able to take full advantage of that. So, I know you wanted me to talk a lot about, specific things that you also ought to be including in terms of measuring. Obviously, you always want to look at, the profitability of everything you sell. Are you selling a lot of stuff that's not profitable and there's no upsell or cross-sell opportunity, and people don't come back and buy from you again with that thing? Then maybe you need to walk away from it, and that may be hard, and you may need to plan a transition strategy to get you selling something that's more profitable. But look at those things. But I really think add speed of response, always look at close rate, look at booked appointments. Those are critical metrics that people forget about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see behind you, you have Fix This Next by Mike Michalowicz. And in there, he has the business hierarchy of needs, right?
Right.
And so interestingly enough, I also look at like metrics as a hierarchy of needs or a continuum, right? Where at the peak, you have the things most important to your business or your dental practice, whatever it is. And usually that's, if you were to go high enough, it would be like the valuation of my business if I wanted to sell it today.
Right.
Then you have profits, then you have revenue, then you have, right? So you start to go down, but at the very top, you have these key metrics that mean the most to you as a business. And then as you start to go down, it gets wider and wider, because once you get down to all of the things you should be tracking to measure your success, right? You talked about the cost of acquiring a new client or patient. So all of those lead up to those things, but you as a business need to understand how that works together in order to get you to the peak of the pyramid of what you want to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, for the last couple of years, and I think we may see this for many businesses for the next couple of years still, a lot of businesses are really in existential mode. I mean, they are trying to find a way to just survive and remain as healthy as possible. There are businesses that, boomed. A lot of home services and home remodeling contractors did exceptionally well because, people who have money continue to invest in those types of things. As a matter of fact, they may, in this country, in the US, they may have even gotten some extra money, or maybe they saved money because they weren't commuting to an office, and they were looking around and maybe they noticed the problems more. So, if you're a painter or, or a siding contractor or, somebody who does room additions, things like that, your business has been pretty good. Is it going to be as good next year? Maybe not, because maybe there's, you've kind of reached that ebb at the top of the wave. I don't think it's going to go down substantially, but for you to realistically think you're on a glide path to continue to just doing what you're doing to stay at 10% growth year over year, or better, there needs to be some reality checking as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what's interesting too about the marketplace right now is that because inflation and other market pressures on consumers is growing, that it's actually uncovering issues within businesses, because now you have to be leaner, meaner, tighter on how you're attracting and acquiring new customers and retaining customers, that the competitive pressures are growing. We definitely see this in the Google ad space. Competitive pressures are huge now, especially in like remodeling and some of those trades businesses. But I think that's healthy, because I think what it does is it uncovers, I remember in the corporate world, one of my mentors said, Ian, sales cover over a multitude of bad marketing mistakes.
Absolutely.
Right? Or any kind of business
or
mistakes,
operational mistakes.
Right. Sales will cover over anything as long as sales are growing. But as soon as sales start to suffer, or there's pressures that you can't control, they will start to uncover stuff within your business that you might have been able to ignore before.
Yeah.
From an operational standpoint, a leadership standpoint, an employee retention and happiness standpoint, right? All of those things start to get a little bit harder when times get a little bit harder. And I think we're in those times for some businesses right now.
We have been, and we will continue to be for many of those businesses. One of the things that I did a lot of government contracting in my early career, and I was involved in the information technology space before I transitioned over to marketing. And one of the things that was ingrained in me, because it was required by the government, is you have to do a rate buildup. You have to know what your direct rate is, what your overhead is, what your fringe benefits costs are, and what your profit margin is. And you had to tell the government in your proposals, here are the percentages, and here's my overall markup on what I'm offering and why. And part of the reason that they wanted to do that is because they wanted, when they're hiring somebody for a 5-year contract, they want to make sure that that business is not paying somebody rock bottom, and that they're going to be losing talent constantly, so that it compromises their ability to execute on the contract.
That they're sustainable, right?
Yeah. And let me tell you, small businesses do not do that. They do not do that. So, when you're it's not as simple as marketing. You need really to sit down and think about your budget and your structure and the profitability of and the cost of delivery of what you're doing. And only then can you start to make really good marketing decisions and where you need to be investing in your money to grow your business, in my opinion.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Now that we've looked at the things that we need to align to, like Ken talked about some of those things, how can the business assess their competitive state? Because as Ken said, we don't live in a vacuum.
Yeah, actually, a lot of what Ken said is applicable to this, but this is where you have to be honest, and you have to look at yourself and your competitors, and what do you do well and what do you do not so well. Maybe you're really good at onboarding a customer, but you're not so good with the follow-up after that. Maybe your customer service is really good once you have them, but your response time is horrible. So you're losing a lot of business because of that. And how do you address that and look at opportunities, threats to your business? Maybe you're getting ready to launch a new product or service. If you have a great email list, you have a customer base to reach out to immediately. And watch your competitors. Maybe one of your competitors decided to really start investing in SEO or marketing services, and you're starting to lose rank to them. You have to be aware of that. and address it and be ready to address it.
Awesome. One of the things it just occurred to me that we really didn't state this earlier on when we were reviewing the year, but it should never be a surprise when you get to the end of the year and you look at the results, right? You should be paying attention to the results. Your team should be paying attention to them month in and month out. And you should at least have an idea, not be super surprised by the end of the year, like, oh, our Google ads didn't work this year, right? So again, this is more of looking at the overall state. Again, you shouldn't be super surprised, but doing a SWOT analysis of where are your strengths, because those change over time. Your competition can displace you from some of your strengths, or they can open up a window into opportunity for you. So I think that's a great activity to do. Jen, Peter Drucker said, planning for tomorrow means sloughing off yesterday. Before you do something new, you have to stop doing something old. How does this relate to the marketing meeting and the planning session?
Well, first, I'm glad you picked up on Peter Drucker. He's so timeless. Even it's amazing.
Smart man.
Very wise. Very wise. With this, I just want to acknowledge something that Ken said, and I think I'm going to use that because it's when we work with small business owners, and even if you've built your company up to something larger. That is a curse of like the small business owner, the entrepreneur, about always having new ideas and whatnot. Yeah. And what you said, Ken, about like any of these random ideas you want to go and pursue, you got to put a budget,
absolutely
attach a budget to it. And I just thought that's the best thing, because that's the way to like bring them right back down to earth. If we're going to have a budget towards it, okay, great. Then we can, put some effort into it. But I mean, we've all been in those meetings, right? Where you, what about this? I had this great idea. Can we just?
Right.
And you're just like, oh, no. But
the shiny object syndrome, right?
Yeah. Too often it's pulling money away from the thing that is already making money for your business. Right. So you're exposing your business and the viability and success of your business if you don't add to budget when you're trying to add something additional.
Yeah, that's such a good point. So I'm going to, that'll be a little Ken-ism.
He collects royalties on a monthly basis.
Oh, does he? Okay. Yeah. All right. I'll let you know if it worked, though. That's the thing.
All right.
I guess it could work either way. Either they're like, okay, we won't do it, or here's a bunch of money, go
exactly.
Go market it. So that's okay. Okay. So all kidding aside, before you do something new, you have to do something old. So hopefully the clarity would have come in the review meeting about what perhaps is not working for us, or what is not aligned where we want to take the business next year. And again, Ken was saying some really good things about just because channels were working for you previously doesn't mean that they're going to work for you in the future. Both channels could change. I know you picked on Facebook a little bit there, so that's fine. But also too, where your business is going, where you find that your ideal customer is going to go. So I think it's really important to take a hard look at that, and to decide to stop doing something is not necessarily any kind of failure at all. But it's going to be important, because your marketing team, no matter how big they are, they only have a certain amount of capacity to put the time and the energy and the focus to only a certain amount of channels. So you got to make sure that the channels that you're focused on are the ones that are bringing you the results. So wise words from Peter Drucker.
Yeah. And I know from the document or what I've seen work really well is if you were to categorize, if you were going to stop things or assess those things, even categorizing them as, we're going to reduce this, we're going to discontinue this, we're going to phase this out, or we're going to avoid this altogether. And I think from a timely perspective, COVID forced people to really reassess things that they needed to slough off for at least a time, right? Some of that stuff's come back now, like events, right? Or they pivoted those things to online events versus offline. But, the point about budget when chasing after shiny objects, I love that. And I think that's true too about like, hey, if we're going to reduce something, how can we reallocate those funds? Like, don't get, and unless there's a need for real big budget cutting for some reason, right? Don't lose that budget. Repurpose that budget in order to get greater results.
Yeah.
Ken, as we assess our marketing activities from the past year to help us determine what we'll do this coming year, what are some key questions we should be asking?
Yeah, well, I think you need to have a reality check or a sanity check on if what you're asking for is possible. You know, and it could be something as simple as you want to generate X number of leads, and you know, you see that Google Ads is the way to go. Is there enough search volume to support that growth? Just, you know, I mean, and keep in mind that, you know, when you look at, and these statistics blow me away, absolutely blow me away, but they're really important. Only 10 to 20% of people will click the Google ads when they're displayed on the search results page, because most people recognize that they're ads. They don't want ads. They want what they think is vetted, trusted information. And you know, I mean, that's not to say that ads are dishonest or misleading. Maybe some of them have been in the past, but people don't see the trust level in an ad the same as they do, you know, on the organic results page. And when you look at the organic results, you know, if you're a local business, 60 to 70% of all clicks or phone calls are happening from the Google Maps result. So I'm going to say that again, 60 to 70% of clicks or phone calls are happening from the Google Maps results. So if you're not on the top 3 of the Google Map results, when somebody's searching for your business, you got an uphill climb. The remaining 10 or 20%, whatever, or 30%, whatever is left, is for the organic search results. And realize that those are typically down below the fold before you even get past the map results. So you need to think about, is your plan realistic? You know, are you going to spend a lot of money doing something like, you know, do people search Facebook to find a business the way they search Google? I don't think so. I know they don't actually. So if you invest all your money in Facebook ads, and you want to be found for search, and you don't invest a whole lot of money in that, and especially to build up your ranking on the Google Map result, you're not realistic. So you got to think about, can the you know, the individual components of my plan and the funding levels of my plan help me, and are they the right channels to be spending, you know, that investment in? Is that going to get me to where I want to go? So you need to kind of back out of it. You know, what if you want to increase your revenue by $200,000 next year? You know, what is your average sale? What's your close rate? How many leads are you going to need to generate to get there? Can you pick channels that are going to get you that volume of leads, to make sure that that's even realistic? You know, I mean, and it may not all be digital. You may have to go hire a salesperson, you know, and they may need to go knock on doors or do a lot of phone calls or whatever. So, you know, so you really have to think about these things. What's missing from our plan? You know, I mean, are there things that we should be doing? I love to look at the low-hanging fruit. Ian, I think you and I have talked about this before. You know, when we start working with a client, I always want to try to find a way to deliver fast results. So, you know, while we may be executing on a website design or a strategy to build out a real robust marketing strategy, in parallel, I'm also looking at, is there something that we can do right now in parallel with what, you know, these bigger things, because they need to be done, that are going to generate results. So you want to kind of look at that and get that in place. I think you need to look at, you know, if you have internal team members or other outsourced contractors, do they have the capacity to execute on the plan? And, you know, are there too many fingers in the pie? Have you assigned somebody to have the clear leadership responsibility of running the marketing, even if it's across multiple companies that you're outsourcing with? There may be contractual issues that you're going to have to deal with that. To say that this person is serving as my fractional chief marketing officer and therefore they have the authority to direct your team. Is that within the current contracts that you have in place? You need to look at those kinds of things. Do you need to build skills on your own internal team? Is that a better way to go, or a supplemental way to go? There's just a lot. I mean, but I think let's see if there's anything else. I think that's enough for now. I mean, anything that you see that I missed, Ian?
Not really. But the one point I would add to that to help people understand like how to determine where they might want to put extra effort is actually using the that hierarchy of metrics that I talked about, looking for gaps. And another way you can translate that hierarchy of metrics is through the marketing hourglass, right? Are there phases or steps within the buyer journey where we need to prop it up? We need to help it. It's not performing as well as it should. And the metrics between each step in that buyer's journey is what will tell you whether there's a problem or whether there's an opportunity for you to improve things even better, right? If you're getting tons of people to go through that marketing hourglass, they're going through the know, like, trust, try, but then they're not converting into a buy, right there, like, hey, that's a key. And I mean, most businesses get that, that intuitively they know, oh man, our sales aren't working. We're getting lots of people there, but we're not converting them. But going through that whole process, and then of course after that, even the referral and the retention, those metrics that you shared earlier, if you understand those and you track those and you got those in your review meeting and you translate them into that marketing hourglass, that's tremendously helpful in, because you don't need to. I'm a strong believer that if you had a really great marketing plan that served you well last year, you don't need to throw that thing out and start fresh. Right. You take what's worked and you modify to get even greater results out of it. It's like, one of the terms we've used on this call before is a marketing engine, right? And I look at it as, wow, you can either install a brand new engine and go through the growing pains of that again, or you can tweak that engine, add on some more components that will help you get more performance out of your engine and get you to your goals faster, better, whatever. Yeah. So no, you raised some great points there, Ken.
Yeah. I mean, one other thing that I just want to make sure I get into is, repurposing content, because the way people are consuming content is now changing. And so if there are things that you can do to take, short form video is the thing right now. I mean, it may change in 6 months, but right now. So you already have a bunch of great at least I hope you do have a bunch of great marketing assets that you can leverage. Can you repurpose those easily to produce, additional marketing assets that maybe work with and align better with the channels that you need to be looking at and investigating now? You don't have to always reinvent and build from scratch.
Right. But again, it's got to fit into the plan.
Exactly.
Just because it's the thing doesn't you could repurpose all the content you want, but if you don't have a plan of how you're going to distribute it, again, it's all about the plan to me. Yep. Paul, during the marketing planning meeting, what are some key areas that a business should consider including in their marketing plan so they don't overlook them? Like Ken's touched on a few, but are there things that you see that, maybe businesses should consider?
Hold on a minute. I have to go look at a shiny object. Sometimes it's more about, it's as much about what you're overlooking as what you should not be doing. For a lot of small businesses, beyond the basic blocking and tackling, they don't really need SEO and they can't afford it. They need to get the basics in place, like a restaurant, they need a text marketing program. That's what they need. They don't necessarily need SEO. So what are you doing that's working? And like you and Ken just said, what can you do? I mean, that's a long list. I'll go through a few things, but
yeah, you don't need to go through the list. That was just a thought starter for you.
But well, like Ken said, maybe you need to hire a salesperson.
Hmm.
Are you doing email marketing, and does email marketing fit into your business? If you're a roofer, I don't know how much an email newsletter is going to really help you. You know, how often do you get a new roof? What's your content plan? Are you generating content for your website? Does social media fit into your business? You know, for some businesses, I'm not going to go on social media looking for an insurance agent. Okay. I'm just not going to do that. So for some businesses, I'm not saying you don't need a presence there, but I'm saying don't focus on it. You know, don't put a lot of money into that. Press releases can be a great way to build backlinks to your website. Although Google has hinted that in the future, backlinks may be less of a ranking factor. What about reviews? That goes to one of the things Ken was talking about. What can we do now? And if you don't have very many reviews, or you have some bad reviews, you can't get rid of bad reviews. But if you can fix whatever's causing those bad reviews, then you can get a bunch of good reviews and kind of bury them. That's about all you can do there. Direct mail. A lot of people overlook direct mail and lumpy mail, and that can be something to consider. Events, trade shows, they kind of went away for a couple of years, but I think they're coming back. Podcasting. Get yourself on podcast. Video marketing. Everybody should have a video sales letter. You know, I mean, this is the video age. People just aren't. They don't read anymore. I mean, I'm not saying no one ever reads, but most people would rather watch a video. And video is more effective, and it can help a small business owner develop that connection with potential customers. So I know we're starting to run long here, but you know, directories. Are you in a business where, like law firm or real estate, there's certain directories that you definitely should be on? Have you overlooked that? Are you on those directories? Is your information on those directories current and correct?
Yeah, and those are all good things, Paul. I think the key too for businesses is, again, you're not trying to chase after shiny objects, but you're trying to. It's almost like going down a checklist panel prior to a flight, like the pilot does a check on his airplane, right? And it's just through the filter of your marketing plan that you mostly have in place already, like the filter for what we're trying to achieve. Do we have the budget? Do we have the means to include maybe something that we haven't gone through, and just go through that list and just say, you know, these are all proven marketing strategies. They can potentially help us. And through that filter, should we potentially add that in as a pilot this year to see if we can produce some even greater results?
And are you spending money on something that you probably shouldn't?
Right.
I think, you know, our friend Ray Perry, who was kind of the inspiration for the concept of marketing guides in the series of books that we started before we did the podcast, he likes to say, you know, there are tool vendors and there are marketing strategists. You need to be working with a marketing strategist. A tool vendor is always going to have a hidden agenda, and they're going to be pushing what's good for them and try to fit your business into their little solution as best as it can. And in some cases, maybe that's all you can afford, and maybe you just need to pick the best one that aligns with your business and just run. And like Paul said, if you're a restaurant and you don't have a huge budget, because I know restaurants are struggling right now, you know, pick a channel, invest in reviews or invest in text marketing. You know, pick a channel, but hire somebody that's not just a tool vendor to help you execute it. Hire somebody who has marketing expertise and strategy, so that when you generate the business using that solution, now you can reinvest it in smart marketing to amplify your results. I had to get that word in. Awesome.
It's a force multiplier, Ken. Ching, there's a royalty fee to Ken.
Yeah.
Jen, we're getting close to wrapping up, but I think this is a really important question. What are some key things from your perspective that should be included in the final marketing plan? So you've gone you've gone through the process of meeting about it. You're now really trying to nail down that plan so that it's executable. How do you do that? What are some key things that you think should be included?
Well, the most important thing I think should be included comes above any of the goals, and it's really, do you have the clear messaging? So, are you really clear? Is the market really clear on the problem that you solve? Or
Nice.
is it really clear on who you solve it for and how you're different from everybody else? And so that has to be there. And then everything else can come out from under it. We didn't really talk a lot about in the review meeting or in the planning meeting if messaging had to be addressed, but it's
Good point.
that will help with everything. So that's got to be there. I also have to bring in some finance stuff. So the marketing plan should include, the budget and the price for what, like, is it your service you're selling? Is it a product you're selling? And if you can, put the profit margin in there as well. So how many services, how many products do we have to sell each month, each week, each day, whatever you're working on, in order to meet our goals. And marketing is tied right into that, because the awareness and the driving down the marketing funnel in order to try and buy is so very important. But if I had to leave you with one thing, I would say, what is the messaging? What's the problem you solve? For who do you solve it? And how are you different?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I had a boss once in one of my corporate jobs, and I thought this was brilliant how he translated it into my own world, where I had this great marketing idea for him. And he said, Ian, how many of our products would we need to sell in order to earn back that money? And that equated it really quickly for me. And that's an equation I use, or a question that I use for my clients when they, even if we can't get through that chasing after the shiny object syndrome conversation, sometimes where that budget question asks, you convert it into, if that's something you really want to test and you're committed to this, how many of your products or services will you have to sell to recoup that cost? And then the rest is gravy. A couple other things I think are super powerful from the planning session to make it executable, right, is having the key KPIs, of course, but then having a marketing calendar. So what are we going to do as a business in order to map out, like, this is what's going to happen in January, February, March, April, so that there's an accountability there. And that's something that you can share with some of those other teams we talked about, where they understand, this is what marketing is going to be doing when, and my needs as, the salesperson that's going to be at an event, it's in the calendar. They know about that. They're going to support that. But yeah, and then another thing I think is super important too is scheduling the next meeting. So when are we going to meet in Q1 and Q2 and Q3 to review how these changes have affected us, and how are we going to continue to be successful? Any other thoughts, anybody, before we wrap up the meeting?
I'm constantly amazed when we talk to businesses about how much they should be investing in marketing, that they always have sticker shock. And, so I think, look, there's no good, simple answer to this, but if you're not planning on 10% of your annual revenue in investing in marketing, and just as a simple number, just as a starting point, obviously you have to look at it. It may be able to go up or down based on the nature of your business. But if you don't know, then just assume you should be spending 10% of your annual revenue on your marketing budget. And then if you don't have the business structure to support and the profitability to support that, you got bigger problems.
Yeah. Good thoughts. Anybody else?
Do you have a better number? Do you use a different number?
My range is always 10 to 20. It depends on where the business is at. It depends on their competitive marketplace.
Oh yeah, right? There are a lot of factors, but just for simple math, if you don't know, if you've never thought about it before and you don't have any expectation, you're not going to go wrong with 10% as a starting point.
Yeah.
And that's foundational stuff. It's not a super high aggressive growth kind of stuff.
Right. But it is surprising by how many, especially small businesses, how many don't have a number close to that range.
Yeah.
And yet their expectations of what can be produced with their current marketing are unrealistic a lot of times.
Yeah.
Paul.
Nope, I got nothing right now.
Awesome. Guys, this has been great. This has been a really valuable discussion. And I think this is a good place to wrap it up. Thank you, Ken, Paul, and Jen, for sharing your thoughts on this topic. Listeners, get out there, do your review meeting, do your planning meeting, get your plan in place, because that will help you be successful in 2023. And also for us, please share this link to the podcast. Spread the news that there are some people investing in helping small businesses better market their businesses and help them grow and thrive. So until next week, keep calm and market on.